Have you ever helped a stranger on the side of the road, only to realize you've just invited a monster into your life? When an 8-year-old boy offered his mother's mechanic skills to a stranded Ferrari driver, he didn't just fix a car. He ignited a deadly mafia war. The rain came down in sheets, slicking the winding, treacherous curves of Route 9W in upstate New York. Dominic Russo gripped the steering wheel of his custom black Ferrari 812. Super fast, his knuckles white, a thin trail of blood dripping from his temple onto the crisp collar of his Brioni suit. He was the head of the Russo Syndicate, a man who controlled half the ports in the Northeast, but right now he was just a ghost, trying to outrun the Grim Reaper. Vincente Costa's men had staged the ambush perfectly. They had caught Dominic leaving a private sit-down in Albany, a meeting that was supposed to be neutral ground. Dominic had managed to shoot his way out, leaving 3 of Costa's hitters bleeding on the pavement, but his car had taken a hit in the crossfire. Now, 30 miles from the safety of his territory, the Ferrari's engine gave a violent, sickening shudder. A thick plume of acrid white smoke erupted from under the sleek hood, blinding him for a split second before he wrestled the dying machine onto the gravel shoulder. The V12 engine sputtered, coughed, and died. Dominic slammed his fist against the steering wheel, letting out a string of curses. He checked his phone. No signal. Of course. The storm, combined with the desolate stretch of mountain road, left him completely isolated. He reached inside his jacket, his fingers brushing the cold, reassuring steel of his Sig Sauer, P226. He had maybe 20 minutes before Costa's sweepers found him. He popped the hood and stepped out into the freezing downpour. The smoke hissed as the rain hit the scorching metal. Dominic stared at the engine bay, completely out of his depth. He could dismantle a global trafficking ring, but he knew nothing about a fractured radiator line. Headlights cut through the darkness. Dominic's hand instantly went to his holster, his body tensing into a combat stance. He waited for the sleek black SUVs of the Costa family. Instead, the heavy, rumbling growl of a diesel engine filled the air. A beat-up, rusted 1999 International Harvester flatbed tow truck slowed to a halt a few yards away. The amber lights on its roof cut lazily through the rain. The passenger side window rolled down manually with a loud metallic squeak. A small head popped out, framed by a mop of damp curly brown hair. It was a boy no older than 8, wearing a faded oversized jacket. "Mr. The boy yelled over the storm, his voice bright and entirely devoid of fear. "Your car looks sad." Dominic stared at the child, bewildered. His hand slowly slipped away from his weapon. "It's dead, kid. Move along before you get caught in the storm." The boy didn't retreat. He leaned further out the window, his bright green eyes assessing the smoking $1 million vehicle. "My mum can fix it," the boy said, his tone ringing with absolute, unshakable certainty. Before Dominic could respond, the driver's side door groaned open. A woman stepped out into the rain. Molly Hayes pulled the hood of her thick canvas jacket over her head, her heavy work boots crunching on the wet gravel. She was 28, her face smeared with a smudge of motor oil across her left cheekbone, her eyes the same piercing green as her son's. She moved with a weary, practiced efficiency, approaching the Ferrari with a flashlight in hand. Dominic stepped into her path, his towering frame casting a shadow over her despite the darkness. "I don't need a tow, I need a ride, and I need it now." Molly didn't flinch. She stopped shining the flashlight directly into Dominic's face, taking in the blood, the tailored suit, and the cold, dead gaze of a man accustomed to violence. Her eyes darted to the slight bulge under his left arm. She knew exactly what she was looking at. "Leo, roll the window up and lock the doors," Molly called out over her shoulder, her voice steady and commanding. She heard the locks click instantly. She turned back to Dominic. "I don't do rides. I run a garage. I tow cars, I fix them, and I charge for it. If you want to leave this expensive paperweight on the side of the road for the cops to find, that's your business. But you aren't getting in my cab." Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous, silken whisper. "You don't understand the situation, sweetheart. I need to get out of here, now. And you don't understand mine." Molly shot back, her jaw setting defiantly. "I don't let men with blood on their faces and guns in their coats into a truck with my son. So either I hook this Italian boat to my winch and tow it to my shop, or you can wait out here for whoever it is you're running from." Dominic studied her. In his world, women either feared him or threw themselves at him for the power he wielded. This woman was doing neither. She was looking at him like he was a nuisance, a pothole in her otherwise exhausting day. He looked back at the road. Time was up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick money clip, peeling off 5 crisp $100 bills. He held them out. "Hook it up," Dominic commanded, "and be fast." Molly took the money without a word of gratitude, shoving it into her pocket. She went to the back of the flatbed, operating the hydraulic levers with a fluid, muscular grace. In less than 5 minutes, the smoking Ferrari was secured on the bed. "Get in," Molly ordered, opening the passenger door of the cab. Dominic climbed into the cramped space. The air inside smelled of stale coffee vanilla air freshener and motor oil. Little Leo was sitting in the middle, staring up at Dominic with wide, fascinated eyes. "I told you my mum could fix it," Leo whispered, grinning. "She fixes everything." "Let's hope so, kid," Dominic murmured, staring out the window as Molly climbed into the driver's seat, threw the heavy truck into gear, and drove them deeper into the shadows of the mountains. Hayes Auto Repair was an old cinder-block building sitting at the end of a long, unmarked dirt road in the woods outside of Newburgh. It was secluded, surrounded by towering pines that shielded it from the main highway. Perfect for a woman trying to hide from the world. Perfect for a mafia boss trying to survive the night. Molly pulled the flatbed into the massive, echoing garage. The fluorescent lights flickered violently as she flipped the breaker, bathing the space in a harsh, pale glow. She lowered the flatbed, and with Dominic's help, they pushed the heavy dead Ferrari onto the hydraulic lift. "Leo, go to the back office. Do your math homework and don't come out until I say so," Molly instructed, tossing the boy a juice box from a mini-fridge. "But I want to watch Leo now." The sharpness in her tone brooked no argument. The boy sighed, grabbed his backpack, and vanished into the small, cluttered office, shutting the heavy wooden door behind him. Once they were alone, the silence in the garage became deafening, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the corrugated tin roof. Molly grabbed a rolling stool, a wrench, and an inspection light. She slid under the elevated front end of the Ferrari. Dominic paced the perimeter of the garage like a caged panther. He checked his phone again. Still dead. He looked at the landline phone mounted on the wall near the tool benches. "Don't bother," Molly's voice echoed from beneath the car. "Lines are down. Storm took out the poles on the county road an hour ago. You're stuck here until morning." Dominic stopped pacing. "I can't be stuck here. You have to patch this thing up tonight." "I can't perform miracles," Molly said, her voice strained as she worked a wrench. "The coolant system is shot, and the engine overheated badly. I need to see what actually caused the leak." Dominic leaned against a tool chest, watching her. He noticed the way her overalls clung to her, the strength in her forearms, the fierce concentration on her face. He was a man surrounded by artificial beauty, by people who sold their souls for a taste of his lifestyle. Molly was raw, authentic, and completely unimpressed by his wealth. It was intoxicating. A few minutes later, Molly slid out from under the car. She stood up, wiping grease from her hands with a red rag. Her expression was completely unreadable. She walked over to the metal workbench right next to Dominic. Without a word, she opened her closed fist and dropped a small, heavy object onto the steel surface. Clink. Dominic looked down. It was a deformed, crushed piece of lead. A 9mm slug. Must have been one hell of a pothole, Molly said, her voice laced with heavy sarcasm. It tore right through the radiator housing and nicked the fuel line. You're lucky this thing didn't explode with you in it. Dominic's eyes narrowed. He stepped into her personal space, his imposing height forcing her to look up at him. You ask a lot of questions for a mechanic. I didn't ask a single question, Molly replied, holding her ground, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. She could smell the rain on his expensive cologne, the metallic tang of blood. I'm stating a fact. You caught a bullet, which means whoever fired it is probably looking for you. And by bringing you here, I've brought them to my son. They don't know where I am. Dominic lied smoothly. Don't insult my intelligence, Molly snapped. Men who wear $5,000 suits and carry suppressed handguns don't get shot at by amateurs. If they have the resources to hit you, they have the resources to track you. GPS, cell tower, pings toll booth cameras. Dominic's eyes widened fractionally. For a grease monkey in the middle of nowhere, she knew far too much about the mechanics of a hit. Who are you? He demanded softly. Molly turned away, returning to her toolbox. Nobody. Just a widow trying to keep the lights on. Your husband. Thomas, Molly said, her voice tightening. He was a driver, a very fast, very skilled driver for some very bad people in Chicago. He thought he could outrun his mistakes. He couldn't. I packed up Leo and ran as far away from that life as I could get. She slammed a wrench down on the table. And now the life has walked right back through my front door. A profound silence settled between them. Dominic looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the pain, the exhaustion, the fierce, unyielding love of a mother protecting her child from the wolves of the world. For the first time in a decade, Dominic Russo felt a twinge of genuine guilt. I won't let anything happen to you or the boy. Dominic swore, the promise binding him like blood. My name is Dominic. I run New York. If we get out of this, you'll never have to worry about a mortgage or a broken-down truck ever again. Molly laughed bitterly. Promises from ghosts, Dominic. That's all you mafia men ever offer. Before Dominic could reply, the deep, guttural crunch of heavy tires rolling over wet gravel echoed from outside. Molly froze. Dominic instantly drew his weapon, flicking the safety off. 3 pairs of headlights pierced the frosted windows of the garage doors. The engines idled low and menacing. Car doors began to open and shut. Vincente. Dominic whispered, his eyes dark with lethal intent. He looked at Molly. Get to the office. Lock the door. Hide the boy under the desk. Molly didn't move toward the office. Instead, her eyes hardened, a terrifying resolve washing over her face. She had spent 5 years running. She had spent 5 years hiding. She looked around her garage, her sanctuary, the only thing keeping her and Leo alive. She wasn't going to let a bunch of tailored thugs burn it to the ground. You're outgunned, Dominic, Molly said calmly. I know, he replied, moving toward the side door, preparing to draw their fire away from the shop. Just do what I said. No, Molly said. Dominic stopped staring at her in disbelief as she walked past him, ignoring his orders completely. She marched over to a massive, ancient snap-on tool chest in the corner of the bay. She pulled out the bottom drawer, which was filled with heavy drill bits. Reaching underneath the metal lining, she hit a hidden latch. The false bottom popped up. Dominic watched, stunned, as Molly Hayes reached into the hidden compartment and pulled out a matte black Remington 870 tactical pump-action shotgun. She grabbed a handful of heavy buckshot shells and began loading the weapon with terrifying practiced speed. Shuck-clack. She pumped the shotgun, the sound echoing loudly in the tense silence of the garage. She looked over at Dominic, her green eyes blazing with the ferocity of a cornered lioness. Nobody. Molly said, her voice like grinding steel shoots up my shop. The heavy metallic shuck-clack of Molly's Remington 870 tactical shotgun hung in the damp, oily air of the garage. For a fraction of a second, the heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel outside paused. Dominic Russo stared at the woman standing beside his ruined Ferrari. The grease smudged across her cheek, the fierce, unyielding maternal fire burning in her bright green eyes, and the steady, practiced way she held the 12-gauge defied all logic. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't screaming in panic. She was coldly calculating. "Get behind the engine block of the Ferrari," Molly ordered, her voice a harsh, commanding whisper that sliced through the drumming rain on the tin roof. "It's solid steel and cast aluminum. It'll stop a high-caliber rifle round. The drywall and toolboxes won't." Dominic didn't argue. He moved with lethal fluidity, sliding behind the elevated hydraulic lift that held his smoking car. He raised his Sig Sauer P226, keeping his eyes locked on the heavy steel side door to his left. "Leo!" Molly shouted toward the back office. "Ears and floor right now." A muffled, terrified, "Okay, Mum," drifted from behind the solid wooden door. Seconds later, all hell broke loose. The steel side door violently burst open, kicked completely off its hinges. Two men dressed in sleek, dark tactical gear spilled into the entryway, raising suppressed submachine guns. They were Vincente Costa's men, expecting to find a bleeding, cornered man in a Brioni suit. They absolutely didn't expect a desperate mother defending her only sanctuary. Molly didn't hesitate. She fired. The thunderous, concussive boom of the shotgun in the enclosed space was physically deafening, a shockwave that rattled the heavy wrenches hanging on the pegboards. The heavy spray of buckshot caught the first hitman square in his Kevlar vest, the sheer kinetic force lifting him off his feet and throwing him backward into the freezing mud. The second man scrambled frantically for cover behind a stack of rusted oil drums, his weapon spitting a rapid, quiet thwip-thwip-thwip of suppressed fire. Bullets tore blindly through the garage, shattering the overhead fluorescent tubes and raining a dangerous shower of sparks and broken glass down upon them. Dominic leaned out from the Ferrari's massive front wheel and squeezed off two precise, calculated shots. The second hitman slumped forward over the metal drums, his weapon clattering uselessly against the concrete floor. "Two down!" Dominic yelled over the ringing in his ears, his respect for the mechanic growing exponentially by the second. "There are more," Molly replied, her hands remarkably steady as she pumped another heavy shell into the chamber. "Watch the front doors." As if answering her warning, a blacked-out SUV rammed directly into the center bay door. The corrugated metal buckled, groaned, and violently tore from its tracks with a screeching wail. The vehicle aggressively backed up, leaving a gaping, jagged hole in the front of the shop. Freezing rain and howling wind immediately whipped through the breach. Suddenly the gunfire paused. From the shadows of the idling SUV, a man stepped forward. He wasn't wearing tactical gear like the others. He wore a heavy, rain-slicked leather trench coat, his face scarred and deeply weathered. He didn't look like an elegant New York mobster. He looked like raw Midwestern muscle. "Cease fire," the man commanded his crew. He stepped into the dim, sparking light of the ruined garage, a cruel, yellow-toothed smile spreading across his face as he looked at Molly. "Well, well," the man rasped over the storm. "I heard a rumor about a mechanic in upstate New York who could rebuild a diesel engine blindfolded. But I didn't believe it until now. Hello, Molly." Molly's blood ran completely cold. The shotgun in her hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. She stepped out slightly from her cover, her eyes wide with a profound terror that Dominic hadn't seen when the bullets were flying. "Garrett!" she breathed. Dominic's tactical mind raced. He kept his weapon trained on the man in the trench coat. "You know him." "I know her dead husband." Garrett chuckled, ignoring Dominic's aimed pistol. He knew she wouldn't start a bloodbath while her son was in the next room. Thomas owed our boss in Chicago a massive debt. When Thomas wrapped his car around a tree, the debt didn't die with him. It passed to his lovely widow. "We've hunted you for 5 years, Molly. Vincente Costa called in a favor tonight to box in Dominic Russo, and imagine my absolute surprise when I find you hiding in the crossfire." Garrett drew a heavy revolver from his coat. "You're coming back to Chicago to work off what Thomas stole, and the kid comes too, as insurance." At the explicit mention of Leo, something primal and violent snapped inside Dominic. The cold calculated, Don vanished, instantly replaced by a ruthless apex predator defending its pack. This woman had pulled him from the storm. She had stood beside him in a war zone, and that little boy in the back room had smiled at him with pure innocence. Nobody was touching them. Dominic didn't say a single word. He stepped completely out from cover, fully exposing himself to the breach, and fired 3 times in rapid, deafening succession. Bang! 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 The first bullet shattered Garrett's knee. The second struck his shoulder, spinning him around. The third pierced the back of his throat. The Chicago enforcer collapsed heavily to the wet concrete, gurgling his last breath as his revolver slipped into the mud. The remaining hitmen outside panicked, raising their rifles, but Molly was already moving. She fired her shotgun directly at the SUV's headlights, shattering the bulbs and plunging the front of the garage into complete darkness. "Move!" Dominic roared, grabbing Molly by the shoulder. "Get the boy and start the tow truck. We're driving through the back wall." The storm was unrelenting. Molly forced the heavy tow truck through the treacherous, muddy logging roads behind her shop, navigating purely by memory. She kept the headlights off for the first 2 miles, relying on the ambient flashes of lightning to see the winding path through the dense pine forest. Inside the cab, the silence was thick, broken only by the roar of the diesel engine and the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers. Leo was sitting between them, his small hands clutching the hem of Dominic's ruined suit jacket. The boy had gravitated toward the largest source of protection in the tight space. Dominic looked down at the child, his heart twisting in a way it never had before. He gently placed his large, calloused hand over Leo's, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You did good back there, kid," Dominic murmured softly. "You were very brave." Leo looked up, his green eyes, still wide, but trusting. "Are the bad men going to follow us?" "No," Dominic said, his voice carrying the absolute, terrifying authority of a man who ruled empires. "I promise you nobody is going to hurt you or your mother ever again." Molly gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles aching. She finally flicked the headlights on as they merged onto a deserted 2-lane county road heading south. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-chilling exhaustion. "Garrett is dead," Molly said, her voice hollow, staring blankly at the rain-slicked asphalt. "But Chicago will know. They'll know where I am. And Costa's men, they saw the truck. I have nowhere left to run, Dominic. I lost my shop. I lost our home. I have nothing." "Pull over," Dominic commanded gently. "I can't stop, they might be." "Pull over, Molly." "Now." Molly slowed the heavy truck, pulling it onto the gravel shoulder beneath the canopy of a massive oak tree. She put the truck in park and rested her forehead against the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking as the reality of the night finally crushed her. 5 years of looking over her shoulder, 5 years of hiding, all destroyed in a single hour. Dominic reached over Leo and gently touched Molly's shoulder. She flinched, but he didn't pull away. He traced his fingers up her neck, his thumb wiping a streak of grease and rainwater from her cheek. She turned to look at him. The Mafia boss wasn't looking at her with cold calculation. His dark eyes were soft, filled with a profound reverence and a fierce, burning possessiveness. "You didn't lose everything," Dominic said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "You saved my life tonight. You fought like a soldier to protect your blood. I have hundreds of men who work for me, Molly, but I have never seen loyalty and courage like I saw in you tonight." Molly swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs. The proximity of him, the sheer masculine power radiating from him, was overwhelming. "Dominic, I'm a mechanic. I'm a widow on the run. I don't belong in your world. My world is violence and shadows." Dominic agreed, leaning closer. "But it is also absolute power. Thomas tried to run from his demons and it got him killed. You've been running, and it brought the wolves right to your door." He cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intensely locking with hers. "Stop running, Molly. Let me be your shield. You come with me to New York. You and Leo. I will put a wall of men around you so thick that neither Chicago nor Costa will ever be able to breathe in your direction again. You will never have to scrape by, and you will never have to hold a shotgun to defend your son again." Molly stared into his eyes. She saw the danger there, the lethal capacity of the man. But she also saw truth. She saw a harbor in the storm. She had spent so long trying to be both mother and father protector and provider. For the first time in her life, someone was offering to carry the weight. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because," Dominic replied, his lips brushing against her forehead. "When I broke down tonight, I thought my life was over. But your son told me his mum could fix it. He was right. You didn't just fix the situation, Molly. I think you might be fixing me." Dominic pulled away just enough to reach into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek black satellite phone, a backup he kept in a waterproof case in his inner breast pocket. He powered it on. Within seconds, the call connected. "Boss!" A frantic voice answered on the other end. It was Lorenzo, his underboss. "Thank God. We found the ambush site. 3 of Costa's men dead, but no sign of you. We have 50 cars sweeping the perimeter. Call them off the perimeter." Lorenzo Dominic ordered, his voice shifting instantly from tender protector back to the ruthless don of the Russo syndicate. "I'm heading south on Route 32 in a tow truck. Send an armored convoy to meet me at the county line." "Done." "Boss?" "What about Costa?" Dominic looked out the windshield into the storm, his eyes hardening into twin chips of black ice. "Gather the captains. When I get back to the city, we are going to war. Vincente Costa has until sunrise to make his peace with God." And Lorenzo, "Yes, boss. Have the penthouse prepared. I'm bringing my family home." Molly gasped softly at the word family. Leo, who had been quietly listening, looked up at Dominic and smiled, leaning his head against Dominic's arm. Dominic ended the call. He looked at Molly, the fierce, beautiful mechanic who had towed him out of hell. He reached across the seat, lacing his fingers through hers. Molly put the heavy truck back into drive. As she steered the rusted International Harvester back onto the highway, moving toward the city, and toward a destiny she never could have imagined, the storm outside finally began to break. The heavy clouds parted, and for the first time that night, a sliver of moonlight broke through, illuminating the dark road ahead. She was no longer Molly the widow. She was no longer Molly the runaway. She was with the Don now, and God help anyone who tried to stand in their way. What an incredible heart-pounding conclusion. From a stranded Ferrari to a deadly shootout, Molly proved that a mother's love is the ultimate weapon, and Dominic found the family he never knew he needed. Did you love this intense, action-packed mafia romance? Hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling real-life drama stories. Leave a comment below with your favorite scene.